Hey everybody, welcome back to Minus 20 Podcast Hot Dish. Whoop, whoop, whoop. This is our fancy episodes where we give you, the listener, a peek behind the curtains at how we build this thing called Minus 20. Last time, we had a discussion about characters, which was really helpful for me, and I hope it was for you guys as well. But this time, I'm on the hot plate. Me, Jay, I'm the GM, I'm the game master who's running this. I realized I didn't introduce myself last time, but that's me. I'm Jay. So I'm going to be in the hot dish. I'm going to answer questions and talk about the setting, the world of Dunia, and particular where you guys will be at, Hammer City in Ward 7. I should probably just give a little preface before we dig into the questions that I know most about your neighborhood and least about the world, if that makes sense. So I'm starting, building from the center out. But I can answer questions about the greater world. So yeah, let's get into it. Well, first let's say hi before we start shooting questions. You want to say hi, Diana?
Hi, this is Diana.
Hi, Diana.
I'm Diana. This is.
And your character name?
Oh, I play Kira.
Kira, the Kitsune investigator. James, hey man, what's up?
James, I'll be playing Bo Poncho.
Oh yeah, character voice is good.
Yeah,
John.
maybe later on.
John.
Hey, it's John. I'm John. I'm playing Marth. Sounds kind of like this, but different. Hi.
Yeah. Holly.
Hi, I'm Holly. I play Seraphina Lex. And Jay, you are in the hot dish hot seat today.
Yes, feels good today because, one of the things we'll give you a peek behind the curtain is we often do multiple recordings in a day. So we recorded in the same day. On the same cold day where it's almost minus 20, we recorded our first hot dish. So it is very cold. I'm glad to be bathing in cheese and tater tots. Because, man.
Okay, that took a turn.
Yeah. Yeah, all right. I think, Dinah, you already had a question.
I do.
Yeah.
The first peek in the casserole dish. Mm-hmm. I would like to know what might be some general laws that we know we have to abide by. For instance, murdering.
Yeah,
we're just going straight there. But maybe it's frowned upon if it's out in the open, but if it's kind of back in the alley, they don't really dig into it. Just some general knowledge about what the laws might be, what we would steer away from versus,
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. So what I would say is, I think I've mentioned this before. Our campaign takes place, and people listening to this hopefully should know by now, is in Hammer City in the 7th Ward, this city in this fictitious world, Dunia, in a region called the Five, which is basically a settlement of various refugee populations. And the people name their cities after implements of peace. Hammer City, because it's essentially a city that takes in ore from nearby mountains. And Ward 7 being the working person's neighborhood, the folks that work in the local iron smelter. And the reason I'm giving this big introduction is because to paint a picture of this working class neighborhood, my influence for designing that was kind of the old New York City boss era. And there is a boss of the ward, Boss Hatchet. And also there are, you guys would know this, organized, and listeners would know this too, there are organized protection racket, they're organized criminal gangs, similar to the old school mafia and stuff. The laws of the neighborhood and the laws of the city are different. So what I would say is depends on who you are if you're murdering, right? But also probably this neighborhood is reasonably safe and free of crime because it is controlled by an organized crime group, and only crime that they control is allowed in the district.
So yeah, I'll take that next question. And a little bit of fun for our Celsius listeners outside the U.S. It is negative 20 right now, or minus 20. So fun flavor for
That's great.
our Canadian and otherwise country people that are smart enough not to use Fahrenheit.
We did it.
But my question, if you were going to give a comparative time frame or city, that a real life city or a narrative city for say a movie that you would compare directly to Hammer City. So and I'll set you up even a little bit more. is there a river running through it, so it'd be very like almost like a Dutch city, or like a somewhere maybe in like Italy, that like the whole area grew because you said the mountain, but maybe like a river, or there's certain architecture that kind of sticks out in your mind. I guess, is there, when you were writing this world, did you have a city or a time frame?
It is kind of a great question. Thank you. A conglomeration of different cities. So the actual geography of the river is based on London, the Thames. It actually curves around that way around London. So I designed the city and the streets kind of loosely based on London, right? But my probably biggest image is, again, like Gangs of New York, this early mid 1800s Boss Tweed like era of New York politics, and the 5 Points, right? That neighborhood. I don't even know where it is, like Hell's Kitchen area, right? It's this neighborhood where these streets converged, and it's kind of this famous, super, dangerous, sketchy area of the city. And so those were kind of what I was thinking about this campaign. However, right, this actual neighborhood in Hammer City is much better than 5 Points was. It's better in a sense because of these gangs. However, there will be, there's a downside to that, of course.
Well, it's kind of like they used to say Little Italy was the safest neighborhood to live in New York because, the mafia.
Right.
Nobody messed around because they knew that it was protected by.
Right. Yeah, John.
So kind of building a little bit off of that, we've got different like divisions between like Hammer City and the wards and the 5. What would kind of be like distinguishing things between like how Hammer City itself is seen versus the ward is seen? Yeah. And kind of a follow-up to it, like what are maybe like some general things for reputations for some other wards?
Yeah, great question. So Hammer City is I think of it as this burgeoning industrial metropolis in the 5, and it's busiest, biggest, loudest, dirtiest city that's in the 5 and around the ironworks, right? The flow of ore into the city from the tributary of the Needle River, which is the main river that goes up the 5, and it's processed there and then shipped out to the coast in the city called Tillerton, which, is again named after another implement of peace, right? The tiller of a ship. And so that's the main port of the 5. So Tillerton, I envision as more of sort of, I guess, old school romantic England with like the ships in the harbor and, naval captains and a little more genteel society. Hammer City is, early Chicago, right? The stockyards and the sound and the smell and the smoke. So that would be its big thing.
So I'm curious, it's kind of a two-part. What are the seasons? Do we get the traditional 4 seasons that we're used to in Minnesota? And with that being said, are we a tourist attraction for anybody, or is it kind of like the people who live here are really the only people who are here? And if somebody from out of town came, it would be pretty obvious.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep it as simple as possible for me. So the climate will be similar. Maybe not to Minnesota, maybe a little warmer because I can't handle my fantasy environment being this cold, right? But similar to New England or something like that. Now, I did have I was thinking, we were debating on what kind of campaign to run. I'm like, I could do like a fantasy Minnesota campaign, which is would be further in a cold region with lakes. What was the second part of the question?
Tourists. Do we get outsiders coming to visit our area?
A lot of outsiders, not tourism. One thing about Hammer City, it's like gold rush kind of town. So it is like people come to Hammer City to buy equipment to go up the river to do mining and prospecting. There's a lot of gold and silver in the hills. And so probably iron and copper are the biggest drivers of the economy. So people come through Hammer City thinking they're going to buy some equipment and rent a boat and go upstream. But as what happens in a lot of these gold rush towns, right? Like they'll get mugged or ripped off, or they'll find that the cost of a pickaxe is too high. They'll get off the boat in the middle of the city, and then swarms of hucksters and grifters and pickpockets will descend on them. And so, yes, there are new people. They are not tourists, and thus the workers of the iron mill are recruited there at the docks after they, lose something, or they realize they don't have enough money to invest, so they think they could work at the factory for a while and, earn enough scratch to get out there with their pickaxe. Yes, sir.
So it sounds very much melting pot town. Anybody can come through to be part of this iron mining experience. So obviously, any ancestry in the Pathfinder mythos basically is going to be there. It's not going to be like, oh my goodness, there's Asimar. It's not anything like that, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I even wrote a player's guide for this, describing what kind of ancestries are there. I discouraged sea-based, right, or forest-based ancestries. So those wouldn't play well in that setting. But yeah, it is a melting pot, people. Although I think I mentioned that it is those sort of prospecting or mining ancestries like orcs and dwarves and folks like that are most probably the biggest populations in some of the parts of the city.
So my setup to that question was, what is the key food of this town?
Ooh, yes.
Good question.
That's a good
In
question.
detail.
So far, I've had just one setting with food. It's sort of the bakery of town. And that was sort of stolen from like Paris, right? Where you get their baguette. So there's this one bakery that produces bread for the people. My assumption would be that even though it is a melting pot, it would be pretty basic food because of the limitations of time and money for the people that live there. So when I envision it, it's probably like stews and bread, That said, that's absolutely spot on. Like there are a ton of people from all over here. I could see little restaurants of different ethnic foods popping up. Mwangi, well, not Mwangi, but, the equivalent in Dunia of the Mwangi Expanse food or something. Yeah, that's a great question. I love it. Yeah, maybe I'll have to thread that in there. Yeah.
How, compared to the neighboring areas, how wealthy is this area? We mentioned it being a gold mining thing. But it almost kind of sounds like parts of the city are run down, with mobs running around, pickpockets. It kind of implies there's a level of poverty going around. So do you get all sides of the wealth spectrum, or does it generally go one way or the other?
Yeah, there is. It's a very stratified society. There are, I think, a total of 9 wards. Generally speaking, the lower you are on the ward, if you're the first ward, the wealthier and more powerful you are. The 7th ward is probably the last ward before you get into real poverty. The 8th and 9th wards, there's the docks ward and then the slaughterhouse ward. There's like cattle pens just on the other side of the river, and they're driven across to this area where they're slaughtered and processed. So there's tanning and processing the meat. So it really stinks in this quarter. There's an unsettled area outside of the city proper where homeless encampments are. And that, I think they were calling it the 9th ward is the unofficial ward. Like there's only 8 wards, but they're called the 9th ward or maybe the 10th ward. So there's that end. The 1st ward is where the first families live. And the first families are the original settlers who came and found gold and established the city on the banks of the Needle River. And so they are immensely wealthy, and there's very few of them, less than 10 of them. And they control all the power in the city, even though they're not on the council or anything like that. They have all the money and the connections, and they live essentially in their own little walled city across the river from most of the rest of the city. And then you get to the 2nd and 3rd and 4th wards, which are owners of the businesses, and their big mansions that are built facing the 1st ward across the river, trying, you're just a hop of the river away from being part of this elite. And then you go down to the middle class with the specific artisans, silversmiths and things like that. And then the financial district where the banking houses are and the coffee houses where you meet and trade stocks and stuff. And then there's the docks, and then there's a religious university district, which is actually nestled right next to the 7th ward, where there's a couple of colleges and universities and a number of large churches, for the larger gods in the pantheon.
So you talked a lot about the city proper itself. When we start getting into the outskirts or we get into the mines, what's the most common creature that is plaguing the town with, oh no, the goblins, the plague rats? What's the creature of choice for both the mines and for outside of town?
Yeah, I would say probably up in the mountains, there's a lot of problems with kobolds and goblins, your typical ones. There are probably other creatures that I haven't really fleshed out, but that would be similar to that. We'll have to go into that later. I don't want to spoil anything. Maybe you'll have to go to the mountains, who knows? And around the environs of Hammer City, not much. If you go upriver, I think I mentioned I have another setting called Fallen Timbers, which is a small village near the city of Axe, which is located pretty far upriver in the forests of the five. There are fey points where it's sort of weak between the material plane and fey. There are swamps on the other side of the valley, so it's kind of an inhospitable region, but that's why the five was settled there, because it was a piece of land no one was on that was given to these refugee populations. So really, the five has a number of places where we could do various adventures, and swampy or ocean adventure or mountain adventure or, in the woods, fey adventure. So, yeah.
Are there any superstitions?
Oh, God.
I know.
Yes.
There's always superstitions. There's always.
Next question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would assume they're associated with the peoples that live there, Like I'm sure lizard folk would have their own superstitions. You'll have to give some to me from your own peoples.
Kitsunes?
Yeah, kitsune superstitions.
So how's Hammer City doing with its population size? Because you say it's a gold rush town. There's a large influx, and first settlers are already pretty well established, meaning that there maybe isn't that much there. Like, are they able to keep up with this influx? Or is this starting to turn into a...
bursting at the seams?
Yeah, like, are there going to be lots of issues, tension, which was going to be another question of what are the tension points in the city right now? But we'll
to answer your first question, I mean, yes, there's overflow. Like this 10th ward, 9th, 10th ward with the homeless encampments is a clear example of that. If, you're unable to work or something, where do you go in this city? It's not a social net city for sure. Even 7th Ward would be crowded. So, going back to the influence of the city, I think of it as like brick tenement buildings, one after the other. Probably some of them very crowded as entire families fit into a room or two to try to, save money to get out of town. I would also say that Hammer City chews people up and spits them out as well. There are a lot of problems, and I'll get to that in a second, but I think people leave the city a lot. They come and stay to make their fortune and get disillusioned and end up moving on, further upstream into the more remoter regions, or maybe heading back to Tillerton and trying to make their luck on the sea, or, maybe as a cheap farmhand on some farm, sort of mid-5, giving up their dreams of striking it rich. The tensions in the city, specifically for Ward 7, right? We talked about these criminal gangs that run it. One of the things they do, and this will be part of, you guys will learn right quick, is that there is one particular gang called the Axes, which run a protection racket. So they, for example, go around and demand money of all the businesses in the neighborhood to keep them safe, right? So there is like this taxation that goes on that most people are not particularly happy with, but, they don't necessarily want to see what happens if they stop paying. And begrudgingly, they probably have to admit that they are keeping the streets pretty well safe. But that's another tension, right? So there is a pretty big homeless and workless element in the city that includes, this will be another problem, that includes workers at the ironworks who've lost limbs or have been in industrial accidents, can no longer work. And the Axes keep these people off the streets, right? Or make sure that they behave themselves. So there's that tension between pushing these problems of urban areas out of the neighborhood by violence that some people may not like. And I'm eyeballing Marth's creator over here. So, the organized crime is at some point does bring benefits, but there's clearly trade-offs. Another thing is, ruling body in the city is the council, and each ward has certain members in the council. It is Ward 7's representative is, I'm not sure if it's going to be Boss Hackett or one of his lackeys, but it is owned by Boss Hackett. And Boss Hackett deals out cushy city jobs to people he likes. And he often likes people who help him get reelected or fill up his coffers or whatever. So it is a corrupt ward, right? On the other hand, people like Boss Hackett because Boss Hackett will give you a job. You know, you might have to do a favor for him later, but he is the provider with one hand, you know, but he also can take with the other. So, you know, people who've been around Ward 7 would know that. People who are fresh might see Boss Hackett as kind of a saint. Some people who may have been there for a while. Another problem is with the businesses. The working conditions are dangerous in the ironworks and other places. The pay is relatively low, right? Clearly, the people who run the places get most of the profits. And there is another tension with the first families. They're mysterious and reclusive. No one sees them much. No one knows how much they influence. They have their own city walls, though, with their own private guards that keep people out. You cannot go into the first ward without a pass. You know, things like that. Big deal, right? And so no one really knows how much they control the goings on in the city. I think that's enough for now.
I'm switching the flow here for a second. So is this the first world that you've created?
Kind of, yeah. So it's an old world I created. I actually created this world when I started playing D&D with my children when they were in elementary school. So Fallen Timbers was actually the first place I created in it. You know, I wanted a place in a fantasy world where you could play any kind of ancestry, class, or race that you wanted to, and that there would be plenty of adventure where you're at. And that could mean world-shattering events could happen nearby, or you could be involved in them. And so having this refugee place where all these disparate people come together, and they're not all good, right? Some of them are terrible people, but just this interesting conflict between different peoples, maybe bringing old grudges with them from where they are, or like ancestral grudges or whatever.
What part of this world are you most excited to DM? Like, what are you hoping we kind of get to explore, or what are you really looking forward to shining a light on?
Yeah. I think for me, like, I'm really excited about the role play, especially with this group, and specifically in bringing out the characteristic of Ward 7, this one little neighborhood. I really want people to feel like they can see, hear, smell, and like experience what it's like to live in this little clutch of streets that we've created together.
Will we be following a calendar, like the Galarian calendar or the Demian calendar?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was thinking we should do Galarian calendar, but in the games that I've run in Pathfinder where we use the Galarian calendar, the days of the week and the months don't mean anything to anybody, right? It's just like, it's Gazra 15. You're like, great. You know? Mm-hmm. So in some ways, maybe I could ask you guys this. I mean, we could keep our calendar and just apply it on this fantasy world and say it's just a translation of Dunian common language. We don't have good words for these months. What do you guys think?
Well, it was good enough for Tolkien. He, in Fellowship of the Rings, he said, oh, it's Monday, October 25th, or whatever the date was. Always takes me out of the world a little bit when he says that, when Gandalf says that.
Would that ruin, we could use the Galarian calendar is pretty cool, but would you guys rather use a fantasy calendar or like?
I mean, you can kind of go the half-see of like Moon Day and Octum the 25th.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that's a really good idea. Actually, let me write that down.
I feel like I've never had an instance where the calendar day actually had any effect. If there's something that the players were concerned about, they would just ask, like, what time of year is it? What time of day is it? Yeah. But I've never played in a campaign where it made a difference, whether it was Tuesday or Thursday, unless there was, I don't know. It's just never come up.
Yeah, I mean, in some cases that will here because, right, there'll be weekends.
Work weeks,
and, I think in a couple of the places I mentioned, that big bar, like on Sundays, it's family day, right?
Oh,
so
sure.
It's like the open buffet, breakfast buffet, and the families come in and they have their regular tables, right? So there will be, I do want to flavor the neighborhood that way. Like days do matter, months do matter. Hopefully there'll be some holidays we can create to fill up the calendar with.
Is there a recognized work week, like Monday through Friday, 9 to 5?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that. Yeah, and it's probably longer than 9 to 5. I'm going to say there's a weekend, even though probably it should be like bad old early industrial days where it's 6 days a week or something. But I think we'll have a 5-day work week. So One demand off the list of the unions.
My follow-up was going to be, what is the big holiday that people come from all around? And if you don't have it, obviously...
I do not have it, actually, so I'm putting that in my notes. That is an excellent thing to do, and we can actually, I am following Paizo's book format for the adventure pass, having like a 6-book format. It might be cool to have like a holiday or some kind of seminal calendar event around each of the books. That's cool. That's a good question. No, I don't have any holiday.
And then like the same idea when we start taking days of the week, like, yeah, it's Fire Day or whatever, or Rest Day or whatever the names end up being. Like, is that like, oh, yeah, you can't go shopping. Tomorrow's Rest Day.
Yeah, right.
Like, no one's going to be open or...
I mean, Galarian calendar weekdays actually I think are pretty, it's like Moon Day, Oaths Day, Wheel Day, Fire Day, Star Day, and Sunday, right? Those are pretty self-evident. We'll probably use those. And then for the months, though, they're based on the pantheon of Galarian's gods. So most of us here are pretty new to Pathfinder, so that would be too much, I think, for us to recognize. Like both the name of the god and like kind of what season they would probably be associated. So maybe I'll just do what John suggested and do some shortening or bastardization of English months.
I like it. So since we kind of like got near it, union.
Yeah.
Not that I would have any interest in those things, but...
Marth definitely would. 2 unions, one which represents the workers of the ironworks, which is kind of in Boss Hackett's pocket. And then the second, I don't even say it's a union, it's a union activists who are trying to bust up the union and bring real reform to the people. Any other questions about it? Yeah. So active, they are described in that sheet I gave you. So yeah.
What do the people of Hammer City do for fun if they have any free time?
Free time? That is an excellent question. I was thinking about that too, especially in light of your character, Diana. Like, I was thinking like, should I limit what weapons that, would Diana's character know how to use a bow growing up in Hammer City? Probably not, but it is probably not a long walk to the outskirts of the city. And I was thinking maybe you would go hunting with your father or something. If you wanted to use a bow, you could justify that. So what I'll probably do is throw that back on you guys and tell me what your characters would do for fun. I can imagine in a similar setting like street bocce, there's groups of old men in the street playing bocce, or for kids, maybe some version of fantasy stickball, thinking of those games that kids played in old New York or whatever. Certainly there would be probably like garden clubs. There are some parks nearby. Eating and drinking, there are taverns, and I think having social clubs would probably be something people would do. We got a little bit of taste of that again with that description of that tavern that has the family's day on Sunday, things like that, where they have their own table. But I can imagine, and this is, again, I'll put this back on you guys. I can imagine like halflings having a halfling social club in town or something.
I'm guessing we pretty much have access to anything, food, weapons, tools, supplies. Is there anything that might be hard for us to come by in this town?
Yeah, so that is a good question. One that I have been thinking about a bit, especially with weapons, right? Like if your character goes up to your usual neighborhood blacksmithy and says, give me a long sword, right? It's going to raise some eyebrows. Like, first of all, you can't afford it, kid. Oh yeah, here's 5 gold. Put this rune on it too, right? Like that's going to be a big deal. So I have been making some kinds of plans on how to get around that kind of stuff. So yes, it's going to be, I think if we're really going to immerse ourselves in this neighborhood, you're going to have to answer questions like that. Can you just zip on down to your neighborhood store and purchase a bottle of poison to spread on your arrows? Probably not, right? And if you need it, where are you going to get it and how, right? So that'll be fun. Establishing a connection in the city where you can buy these things without being any suspicion might be something you have to do as a quest.
However, food is we referenced hunting, going out into the woods.
Yeah.
Is that primarily how people would have to get their meat, or is meat such a common...
No, there's a market that's, I think I called it Triangle Square, is the center of Ward 7. Like that. So it's a confluence of streets in the middle of the neighborhood that creates a kind of triangle. In the middle is like a big plaza. And so it's triangle square. And so in the middle of triangle square, every day there's a market set up where people sell their farmers come in from the outskirts and set up their bins, and you can buy meat, cheese, and vegetables there. Yeah.
Being a very much vigilante style campaign, how does judicially things work out? So is the expectation that, you were caught taking bread, you were caught harming somebody? Is this a situation because of powers that be, that they have an influence on how punishments get dealt out? Or is this a trying to be a better city and there's a higher order and there's less touching of that, and like the judges can do judge things? Or are they just as morally corrupt as given any other organization?
Yeah, I forgot to mention the town guard and sort of the problems of the city and the different peoples in it. So there is a town guard. They're in the ward. They're in across the city. However, in the ward, they are clearly on the pay of some. Basically, their job is to not interfere with the axes. They do enforce some laws, but usually they're around like evicting tenants who don't pay rent on time or things like that, sort of the safer police work. The axes take care of protection and security in the neighborhood. As a result, the police don't really respond to murders and stuff. They do slowly, and they let the axes handle. Usually axes punish somebody for the murder if it's not approved by their organization. Whether or not they catch the right guy or not or whatever, they make an example of somebody. And the town guard's job is not to interfere with that. So they'll, show up late to the murder scene, put in some reports, do their due diligence, but they're not what we think of as, what we think in Minnesota is different. But I mean, what we think of when we think of like CSI or like those cop shows with gung-ho doing their jobs and they're competent.
So would you say it's accurate to say that people, if, I'm having a problem with my neighbor, would I go to the axes?
Yes.
I wouldn't take matters into my own hands. I would go to them, kind of like the beginning of The Godfather,
Right.
where they come and they plead their case.
Yeah, you would, especially for something serious. On minor stuff, you may not want to get the axes involved because it'll cost you, right? Like There's no free judgment from the axes. They may do it for free now, but they'll ask for a favor later, right? So if you can work it out between yourselves, great. If not, then you go to the axes. For things like property disputes, you would go to the city. Like the axis don't care if your lot you just bought isn't zoned for business and you need to move it along. That's a city matter. You have to bribe the right officials, that kind of. There's also in the city a federal presence. So the 5 is actually a region controlled by a larger kingdom, Darenal. Darenal, the king of Darenal, several generations ago, invited the refugees into the 5. So the 5 is actually a province of this larger kingdom. However, it is quite removed. There's a mountain range between the 5 and the valley where Darenal resides. There is, in the first ward, and behind this walled city with the first family, there is a keep called the Black Keep. And in it is the representatives from the kingdom, the federal. And they're very small presence, and mostly there to make sure that the proper federal taxes are paid by.
Just so I'm understanding it correctly, let's do a 3 steps of the situation happens. A first level, Bo Pancho, the bystanders, see a fight between 2 groups of people. That's phase 1. Phase 2, in that fight, someone casts a fireball. The fireball hits a local business. That's level 2. Level 3, that fireball also incinerates in one of the other people. In those 3 situations, who intervenes, and what would be an expectation as a bystander to that? Like, I know the axes are coming, or I know the town guard's not going to give a crap about this. Like, what would we expect in those 3 scenarios?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, first of all, most people, knowing that the axes would retaliate if something happened, probably wouldn't let themselves get to level 2, right? There are brawls between groups all the time in the city. It's working person's town, right? So there'll be bar fights and fights between the 2nd and 3rd shift at the ironworks, and after a softball game or whatever. Anything more serious, the axes would show up first, probably. town guard would actually come as well, even though most of them are middle-aged dudes with paunches. Just their presence would probably signal to people that a serious offense has happened. You know, if the axes do the actual physical restraining, the person will end up in the city jail.
Taxes.
Yeah, I think for most of the people in Ward 7, there probably isn't much to worry about as far as taxes to the city. Likely the people paying the taxes, for example, would be the owners of the tenements that you guys are in, and whatever taxes are collected are paid through rent. There are really no sales taxes or anything in the city. Most of the tax base of the city would come from the sale and processing of the ores, you know.
Went hunting and we caught something, we brought it home, we wouldn't have to pay any kind of fee.
No.
It's sad that even in fantasy world we have to consider taxes, but
it's a
it
great
could
question.
be an important part of it.
Right. But there are taxes from the axes, right? So
Nice little ring to it.
axes taxes. You got to pay up. And you need a favor, need some, you know, you want to know who the right person to talk to, you go
More
to the axes
bribery.
and you pay a small fee, a processing fee to see, you know, that kind of thing. So unofficial taxes. Yeah, in the Kingdom of Darnall gets its taxes from the city itself, you know, based on the amount of commerce that goes through. And the city is pretty good at paying that because they definitely like having the federal authorities not pay much attention to the city. So the taxes keep the federals away.
Speaking of commerce, what level of commerce is there in the 7th Ward? Like, you talked about artisans kind of being in, like, the wards above, but it's also a neighborhood. So what would we be able to expect to find?
So in the neighborhood, you would be expected to find neighborhood businesses, small markets, small restaurants, small taverns, small blacksmith who makes doorknobs and horseshoes and nails and things like that, a potter who makes, you know, everything like that. So whatever you guys need, you could find at your local store.
Being a mining town, what is like the primary stone that you would see? Is this like, is most of the buildings made of the brown stone? Is it a red stone? Is it like the gray basalts everywhere? Or is it because there's so many different stones coming out, it's almost like Italian city on the bay kind of thing where it's just bright colors and things like that? What paint me the word picture of?
I actually like the third. I didn't thought about it. That's a great freaking question. I love the third thing where it's all these different stones, and that would track with like the kind of metals they're pulling. So let's just say it's a mixture of stone, you know, and maybe even you could identify the age of the neighborhood based on the predominant stone, you know. Maybe in the 7th Ward, it's a mixture of everything kind of cheap, and then brick and gray stone. And then you go to the 1st Ward and it's all like, you know, marble and no.
So to piggyback off of that,
Yeah.
how tight are the buildings? How tall? Just speaking from a profession that's going to probably do a lot of lurking on rooftops.
Pretty tight. So there'll be close packed in tenements that are probably only about 2, maybe 3 stories high. Not too big, not like skyscrapery tenements. But they'll be right along. So there'll be beautiful dark alleys to skulk about in, and you could easily leap from rooftop to rooftop. Yeah.
So Boss Hackett, that's his name, right? Hatchet. A couple questions about him. Would he be somebody that grew up in District 7 and got promoted to this position? Is there a position beyond his that he might be striving for to get promoted out of? Or is he just kind of the boss? He stays there until he dies? You know, what's kind of that dynamic?
Yeah, so he's based on these old party bosses from the 1800s. He would be a resident of the neighborhood. It's not a job he's assigned. It's a job that he creates through force of will, violence, and money, right?
Okay.
So he's the guy, he's the fixer, right? He controls the votes in the area. He controls the money. He controls the jobs, and he's the patron, and everyone goes to him for patronage. That's how he won his position, is by doing people favors and getting stuff in return, growing his stature that way. I'm going to just stick with common, but every language that's spoken in the world, we're not inventing new languages for the game. So any language that can be spoken is spoken here.
Would it be commonplace? So say you're in the 7th Ward, you're in south side of it, it's Orc Town, let's say. would we expect like, oh, hey, they can speak common, but they're not going to. Like they keep closed off kind of thing. They're only going to speak insert the orc language because I don't know it. Is that kind of a level we can expect, or is it because it's more of a transactional town, like everyone's speaking common because they want people to buy their stuff?
Certainly, yeah, you can speak common anywhere. I like the idea of flavoring different neighborhoods or different areas or different even tenement buildings with languages, but it probably would be a flavor. It's not going to be an impediment to the campaign. You're not going to have to learn orc in order to unlock the solution to a part of the campaign.
Can you talk a little bit mechanically about the faction system and the reputation system that you are going to be operating with?
Yeah, so I'm basing it on Paizo has a reputation system. It's similar to the way that the rules handle diplomacy in Pathfinder 2. So you have your person you're trying to influence on a scale from like very positive to very negative. And so your actions in the city and in the ward will move different factions up and down that reputation system. So, for example, if you beat up some axes, right, your reputation with the axes would plunge. But also your reputation with the neighborhood might plunge too, depending upon the situation and why you beat up the axes and what the result of that beat up was. So I think it'll be interesting where you're wanting to keep a pulse on what the neighborhood, what the town guard, what different factions within your neighborhood think of you. And so I'll flavor some of the day-to-day experience with what you hear in the streets.
Is there a sewer system that's...
Oh, yeah.
Are you able to travel through it?
Yep.
So you can travel sewer, you can travel... I mean, I'd imagine most people aren't, but sewer, street, and then possibly even building rooftops.
Yeah, there's going to be... You guys will have ways to get around the city without being seen and places to hide. Yes. Yep.
There's no skyway system, though?
Public transportation there is
Robin
amazing.
Hood, bridges connecting the houses.
No, just you could probably leap over the gaps between them though. But that's not in the first ward. If you end up there somehow, you're not going to be jumping rooftop to rooftop. You'll have to sneak through the carefully cultivated, elaborate English gardens they have on their properties.
Servants' entrance.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any indigenous people before this?
Yeah, that's, I had thought about them like, well, all these people came in and moved. Like, am I creating like a story of expansionism and colonialism here in this area? So I'll say no. There were maybe wild beasts and some feral, loosely organized creatures like what I can't even think any offhand.
30,
Mitflits or whatever.
30 to 50 feral hogs.
Yeah,
I
30
think.
to 50 feral hogs. But it was too inhospitable and dangerous a place for anybody of, maybe there was like an encampment or two of a witch's coven or something. Maybe they resented the encroachment of people, but there are still plenty of wild places in the 5, and witches are not like unwelcome in the 5 by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah.
What do we see, hear, and smell? Do we see trees inside the city? Does everybody have a tree in their yard, or is it more like urban Minneapolis where you typically don't see that? Are we smelling bakeries?
Can I answer these one at a time?
Yeah.
Okay. So no, not so many trees in your neighborhood. Different neighborhoods have different, like Fourth Ward probably has a lot of parks and trees. First Ward is mostly empty land that's been shaped into gardens. Seventh Ward will be mostly tenement buildings, pavement, brick, stone, with occasional tree nearby or a pocket park like in the middle of Triangle Square. I'm going to keep saying Triangle Square, just get a rise out of it, John. Okay. Smell. This is an industrial quarter, so it smells like coal smoke. It smells like sulfur. It smells like soot, like wood smoke. It smells like blacksmith furnaces. It smells like exotic. Well, now we've already demonstrated there's so many people here. There's probably all these great exotic markets everywhere and different kinds of cooking. So it's probably, when you get into the heart of the tenements, it probably smells like spicy cooking along with like dirty laundry. There's probably, I haven't talked about sewage. I don't know how far I'm going to get into the day-to-day stuff, but there's a sewer system, but there's probably pockets smelling like raw sewage. I mean, it is like, how would you say it? Like unleashed, 18th century city kind of
It smells like consumption.
Yeah. And then what does it sound like?
Here, yeah.
So during the day especially, you can hear sort of the rhythmic pounding of whatever's going on in the ironworks. You can hear clang of metal on metal, constant crowds, very packed, so probably a babble of voices and languages everywhere you go. Not many horses in this area, but you might hear the occasional clip-clop of hooved horses, that kind of thing.
Do the Axes have a direct rival faction? I like the Shields or something, or was their rise to power by taking out the group before them, the Rapiers?
That's a great question. That was something I've been mulling. So right now, you only know of the Axes. They're probably did take over from some previous group, or maybe it was more of a lawless. Maybe there was cycles where you have one and you have gang war, or maybe no gangs at all. And it's just right now it's the Axes without many rivals. But yeah, there are people who think they could do it better, for sure.
With the exception of Ward 1, how much mobility is there between the different wards? And I don't mean like moving and moving up or anything, but what if you came into a little money and you wanted to go out for a nice dinner? Would you go to a different ward, maybe the next one up, to go to a fancy restaurant or something? Or do people just keep their own?
You can walk freely about most of the city with the exception of the walled parts of Hammer City, which is the first ward, and parts of the second. The second ward is the university religious area. But yeah, you can wander around freely. I could imagine if you saved enough money, you could go take a walk across the river through the parks of the fourth ward, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe go to a nice restaurant with like outdoor seating or something. It is a very class-based society, so you would stand out unless you had some... Serafina probably would be fine there, would know the appropriate outfit to wear to dinner on the, it's like that stereotype of woman wearing skin-tight leather pants and a tiger striped shirt to like a fancy dinner, like, in a movie. That's the kind of gatekeeping that exists. It's not physical.
What level of magic would we see around the town? Obviously, this is a magic society. Everyone has some level of access to it. Is it a situation, if I went into the blacksmith, would I see him physically swinging, or would I see animate objects doing 5 different options in the background while that person's doing it? Or if I'm walking down the street and it's nighttime, are they lighting torches, or is it like little drift globes that light up the town? Like what level of magic is commonplace, and what level of magic is, no, you are now what we would consider a medium to high level caster?
Yeah, I think of it as, I guess, well, yeah, that's good. Those really nice different views of how a city could be. That's really interesting. My vision was there is plenty of magic in the city. However, it's not used for mundane things like street lamps or whatever. And that, there are wizards in Ward 7. It's like a wizard shop. There's even a bar I think I had where wizards meet up. And there's a university in town that is for, I think I put this in the notes for the map of Hammer City, but there's one college for learning magic to assist with mining. So they train like engineer magicians to go out and help excavate and transport ores. And they have temples you learn how to be a cleric, but it's mostly aimed at how you can be of use to earn more profits for the people who are paying for your education, kind of thing. Eerily similar to probably how we run things here. All right. But you still would have magicians and stuff throughout the city. But a blacksmith probably would, especially in Ward 7, would do the work on their own. I could imagine in like Ward 4, if you wanted to get a magic item crafted for you, you'd have to go to Ward 4 to get the specialist blacksmith who can create magic items. It is something that's available in Pathfinder in downtime. So it is something you could set up as a shop for yourself in town. I'm going to create, people would come and get a magic pick or something,
Is there a curfew either in our town or traveling from ward to ward?
No curfew. So yeah, Ward 7 especially not, since they probably have shifts that go around the clock. So most of the places, the streets would be pretty busy all through the day. For the other wards, like especially like Ward 4, I keep going back there. I mean, that's, I think, the one ward I've thought more about because of Serafina's character. Would be more like the suburbs now. Like if you go there, everything will be closed. It's not you're not allowed there, but like somebody from Ward 7 walking around Ward 4 at 10 at night is going to get, the town guard in Ward 4 isn't like the town guard in Ward 7, right? They're more active. They're actually keeping the peace in Ward 4. So you would get a visit real quick from the town guard there.
Yeah. Being a polytheistic world, would there be basically like every different god under the sun would have a different temple, mosque, whatever, house of worship kind of thing? And are there some that are more prominent and some that are actually like condemned or outlawed within the city?
Yeah, there's a number of them. There are main ones. In fact, one of the major, I think there's one cathedral inside of the walls in District 2, and I believe it's a cathedral to Torag, the dwarven god of smithing. So when the city was first founded by the first families, I think that was their premier god. Since then, Abadar is now the foremost god worshipped in the city. Abadar, of course, is the god of commerce and business. Its temple is outside of the walls. And so as a result, it's an interesting dichotomy. You go inside the walls in Ward 2 and it's kind of sleepy and run down and fusty and not much is going on. As soon as you step outside, that's where all the action is. But the closer to the walls you are in Ward 2 as a temple, the more prominent you are. And Abadar is like right across outside the wall with the biggest temple in the city. And then the smaller sects and more localized gods would be strewn throughout that area. I haven't thought about this specifically, but it would make sense to me, and we can make this canon, that certain gods would not be allowed at all. I'm going to massacre their names, but there are some that are like chaotic evil that are only interested in, destruction of the world. Asmodeus, the lawful evil devil god, would totally have a temple there and be a somewhat respected religion in the area, especially now that alignment is gone. But the idea of contracts and acquiring power does have a lot of say in the city. So yeah, it's a panoply of religions, and some of them maybe you wouldn't expect to find so prominent, but are there, yeah. Again, you can tell me what your characters are interested in for religion, and I can make more detail. I can make a temple for you. And in addition, probably there would be small temples within Ward 7 for particular groups that are there. I imagine Torag probably is more popular in Ward 7 than he is in the Temple District.
Is there any reason that we would ever interact with the first families? Would we ever see them? Would they ever call for what would a scenario look like that we would ever interact with them?
Well, for example, if the first family wanted some kind of a specialty item, crafted or whatever, they might call on a famous artisan, probably from the 4th Ward. And then instead of going to the shop, they would be called into the 1st Ward to visit with the family and get the order there and then go off and make it and bring it back. Things like that. Certainly bank owners and manufacturing owners probably would treat with the first families. Occasionally, one of the randy, younger sons of the first family might go carousing out with the hoi polloi in the 7th Ward, but it's pretty rare.
So there's five first families?
Yeah, I think I'm thinking 5, yeah.
And then they just keep to themselves in the 1st Ward unless they need something?
Yeah. They're pretty mysterious, weird, and that's part of their mystique, yeah.
What is the fun curse word for the city? So what would be the F word and the D word that we could get away with saying on a YouTube, per se, that our character could say that we will not have to edit out in any way or form?
I'm going to leave that to you, James.
Okay, all right. I'll be on top of all curse words canonically.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So we all know that like Boss Hackett runs the ward, and that the first families run the city.
Mm-hmm.
Who on paper actually runs the city? Is there like a city council or a regent?
The city council, which is the representatives from each district, each ward serves on the city council. And that's why the wards got the names they did. They're wards, they're voting wards. Each ward is represented on the council. The higher the ward, the more the representatives, the more power.
And it's a voted on position?
It is voted.
Obviously a tainted vote, but voted.
Yep, and it's voting is pretty fun. Like, it's a lively, rowdy activity. Yeah, that involves a lot of drinking and promises and fights in the street and that kind of thing.
Like caucusing.
Yeah, it is like a primitive caucusing. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the way elections were run in the early 1800s, right? Where you don't have a secret ballot. In fact, I think in the early 1800s, you would actually have in your hand a paper with all the candidates you're voting for, and people in the opposition parties would ambush people on the way to the polls with this list and tear up their lists and stuff and prevent them from voting. So there's skullduggery like that in Hammer City for sure.
How many top hats are we going to see on average?
I didn't even think about top hats, but as many as you want. I would say the top hat is probably not the hat of choice in the 7th Ward. You're probably thinking more of like those forage caps or, things like that. Top hats would probably be exclusive. I think it's the 3rd Ward. That's the financial district. So the bankers.
Well, but there's two kind of versions of the top hat. There's the bankers official, the ones that I imagine, all of the political clubs, all of them are wearing.
Yeah.
But then there is your fun gangs of New York.
Yeah.
Like I show that I'm the boss with my top hat that is kind of a little bit wonky or a little bit like, I don't know, the 18th century version of a pimp hat. Like
I think this is a fantastic idea, and I'm gonna have to think about that. I will have clothing outfits for people when we start. This is great.
Did you say there was a river that goes through the city?
Yep, it's the Needle River. And there's another river that comes in from the mountains, and they meet in the middle of Hammer City. So the river has essentially 3 banks. One in the fork between where the two meet, and that's the 1st district. It's on a hill surrounded by a wall. And so you can see the Black Keep with its black walls up on the hill above the city, surrounded by these mansions. And then in the main part of the city is just on either side of the Needle River. To the north is Ward 7, and next to it is the Temple Ward. And on the south is the docks, where most of the storehouses and warehouses for the incoming and outgoing goods are stored, and like where the rowdiest bars and there's 3-card Monty played on the street, and it's like tumultuous where the new arrivals unload. The 4th Ward is southwest, kind of back from the river, and then right up next to the river is the 3rd Ward, where the executives live in their big mansions, the ones who owns the ironworks and the banks. And then off to the side is the 8th Ward, which is the slaughterhouse district, and that's far downriver away from the others because of the stench.
Are the rivers fresh water?
Yes.
Is that where we primarily get our drinking water from?
Yeah. I mean, I imagine there are wells in the area. And since we have a sewer system, I'll even say there's probably some aqueduct system to have. But you would probably have to go to like a common area to do washing or take your bucket of water for the meal. These are great questions. Thank you. Any other big questions or little questions? Do you have a better sense of like this neighborhood now?
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, I just want to emphasize a lot of these questions can be answered by your characters, right? Like if you are interested in clothing, you can tell me, yeah, I think it should be this way. And I'm like, yeah, the less I have to come up with my own, the happier my brain is. Well, actually, that's not true. My brain enjoys the exercise. But it can be a collaborative effort. Swear words, clothing, food, who's in your building that you live in, right? These can be fun things that you could come up with, and you could describe to us, the audience, as we play the game. Awesome. Thank you so much for the questions. I hope the listeners enjoyed this as much as I did. It's been great. I can't wait to get started on this. Hopefully, it'll be neat to listen to this later and see what actually got into the game.
What swear word did James settle on?
Yeah.
I'll print off a nice little card that we can put it next to here and be like, I don't even know. We'll see.
Swear word will just be beep.
Yeah, that'd be funny if the swear word was beep.
Yep.
Get your beeping hands off me. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Jay.
Thank you, guys.
Yep, thank you, Jay.
Thanks,
Stay
Jay, for
warm.
creating a world and all.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Literally. All right, guys. We'll see you later. Stay warm. Stay out of the -20.
Bye-bye.